Greetings. Welcome back to the Black Pill. Let's talk about the costs of getting an education. Now, I'm a psychologist, and in psychology, before you attempt a treatment or course of therapy with somebody, you need their informed consent. Their informed consent implies that they know what's about to happen, and we're going to go through a document and read all of the statements and make sure they understand them and get the agreement. And they need to know the alternatives, the potential risks, and the potential benefits of any given procedure, set of procedures, course of treatment. And when it comes to education, there is no informed consent. We're very big on telling people the benefits of education, but really not the risks. And so this is just going to be a quick, like I'm quick about anything, a quick 10-point list of the potential risks of like changing social classes, of going from someone with a high school diploma or less to someone with a master's or a doctorate in a subject. So the number one risk is, in no particular order, I suppose. The first one is debt. It costs money to change social classes. We moved in America from grants largely to loans over the last 40 or so years, not coincidentally, as Black, Indigenous, and people of color entered the ed system and for profit education started gaining a real market share and lobbying the government. So I graduated 12 years ago with $133,000 in student loan debt. Having made my payments on time every month since then, I now only owe $178,000. Thanks, student loans, I can literally never repay you, as the meme says. That's because income contingent repayment doesn't cover the interest, which accrues. My only hope is public service loan forgiveness, PSLF. Think very seriously about whether you can make enough additional money with an education that education is worth the cost. Okay. Item 2. I come from working class British. Most of that side of the family turned to conservatism because they're poor and uneducated and easily misled. We don't have anything left to talk about. They don't understand me. I don't respect them. These are folks who pretend they are less intelligent than they are because intelligence is a class marker. To be smart and to write with good grammar would mark them out as class traitors. And thus I can't go home again? Number 3, changing social classes is professionally hard. Folks I graduated with, some of them walked into internships and fellowships. They were connected. I wasn't. I didn't know anyone or how to navigate the system. Say Richie McRitchie Pants gets an economics degree. His family have connections and he slides right into a 6-figure Wall Street internship. Or he gets a law degree and his parents are lawyers or no lawyers. So he's courted by the white shoe firms. Where does your internship application go? Right? The slush pile. You have to compete. And if you don't come from a certain segment of society, you don't have the code words on your application that really make you competitive. Item 4, changing social classes takes time. For psychology, it takes on average 10 years for a doctorate to become revenue positive. I beat the curve. I landed a full-time academic job in 8 rather than 10 years. With my student loan payments, I earn about 10% more than before I graduated. Item 5, it costs money. Redo. I had to drop to part-time and then quit entirely to finish graduate school. And so we racked up debt, not just student loans, but cost of living loans and credit cards. We just finished paying off the cars a few years ago and the credit cards a couple of years ago, and other related debts. And so that increased earning has largely over the last 10 years gone to service the debts that were the cost of moving up to the higher earning level. Just think seriously about it. And the student loans, of course, are hopeless. Family doesn't change social class. Item 6. Not just the class or race traitor stuff, the lack of coevolution, but your family stays poor while you move into a higher income bracket. So the ability to accrue and manage wealth is always hampered by your poor family looking to you for help because you're the one with resources. One family member's success gets diluted among a poor family or among a poor community, and that cost to benefit for the individual or their new nuclear family tends to dissolve or disappear. No progress really gets made. um, you learn stuff. Item 7, you learn stuff, and isn't that the point? But learning stuff means you can't hold on to the things you think you know now. You're wrong about so much. Basic stuff like how many senses do we have? And does the moon orbit the Earth? No, it doesn't. The moon and the Earth are practically a binary planet, and we co orbit a point like 100 kilometers under the crust of the Earth. So much super obvious stuff is just beyond you because you've never been exposed to it. And the world doesn't work the way that you think it does. I remember Rick Santorum in his sweater vest all mad a few years ago that people go to school and lose their religion, and so you shouldn't go to school. And there's a whole like Christian nationalist propaganda industry. God is Dead, that movie series, stuff like that, convincing the lower classes that when you get to university, professors insist you abandon your faith or fail the classes. That is not it, though. That's not it. If I insisted all of my students write on a piece of paper, God is dead, or drop the class, man, I would get friction burns on my ass skipping across the parking lot. That's how fast I would be ejected from my position. It's just the more you know, the less supportable are many kinds of faith. Item 8, empathy. You might gain empathy for people who are not like you. Much of education these days is empathy induction, or at least empathy inducing. Real inclusive history, inclusive practices, culture informed or culturally responsive teaching methods, and so forth. In psychology, of course, especially the graduate level, that is really explicit. But also, you'll just be in rooms of people who aren't like you. They're of different races and cultures and classes and ethnicities and religions, and talking together, working together. You might find out you've been a bit of a bigot. Like, not on purpose, but just out of not knowing anything. And that hurts. Your in groups are arbitrary. You don't really pick your in groups. You kind of grow up into a place, and those are the people who are like you, and that's that. What counts as us and them can, though, change by exposure, and you might find your us growing and your them shrinking. And item 9, empathy sucks. It's awful. Like, walking around all the time aware of the suffering of others and suffering therefore in sympathy, it sucks. I remember when I was a baby autistic and I had no concept that others were suffering or that it mattered, when it made no more impact than watching an animal eat another animal on Discovery Channel. But now it matters. It hurts. The hurt is good. Connection is good. I wouldn't give it back anyway, but I wish someone had asked me first if this is what I wanted. And that's all depressing. Refer back to my very first video on the channel on the nature of hope and despair. The more you know, the harder it is to believe everything's going to be okay. And the more you care, the more it hurts. Like, depressive realism is a thing. Depressed people are hard to talk out of their depression because often they're right. You know? Climate change is killing us now, not in the future, now. Yeah? We are the grandchildren that people in the 80s were talking about would be affected by climate change. It's now. And all we've managed to do in the last 40 or so years is marginally decrease the rate at which we increase carbon emissions into the atmosphere. America's trembling on the edge of fascism. Joe Biden is wrong. MAGA is not semi-fascist. They are full-on, straight-up fascists. That's why they're so mad about being called that. If conservatives win in 2022, they'll win in 2024 just by rigging the system. And then democracy is over. If we lose it, we never get it back. And that is just for starters. You start looking into stuff like mass incarceration and the war on drugs and American racism and sexism and abortion politics and stuff. And it's all very, very grim and interconnected, and it's hard to find even a place where you could possibly lean and push. And it's hard to imagine even that voting makes any impact because you're just one person in this ocean of, 338 million other Americans. So is it worth it? Is it worth all of that time and money and pain and effort? And for me, the answer is yes. Yes, of course. My education made me a real boy. Before that, I was just a wooden doll, not even really aspiring to humanity, a baby autistic. You can take everything away. You can take my income, you can take my family. I will still have that achievement and I will still possess that knowledge and those capabilities. The ability to think things through, the ability to sit knee to knee and eye to eye with someone who's in distress. And you don't vote because your individual vote decides the election, almost always. You vote because the more people vote, the more that we have democracy. And education's the same. Sometimes you gotta bite the bullet. You don't get your COVID vaccine just to protect yourself. You get your COVID vaccine because the more people mask and wear vaccines in the early days of the pandemic, the more protected we collectively are. It's patriotic. And without people willing to take on the despair and the debt of education, we just have a whole country of people with false hope in which fascism can flourish. That's it for the Black Pill today. Where do you watch this stuff? Okay, bye.